than a decade, David Walliams felt untouchable on British television. He wasn't just a judge on Britain's Got Talent, he was the heartbeat of the panel, the unpredictable wild card, the man who cried with contestants one minute and roasted them the next. To millions of viewers, he appeared harmless, emotional, and deeply invested in ordinary people chasing extraordinary dreams. But behind that carefully polished TV persona, something far more complicated was unfolding. And when the curtain finally slipped, it didn't fall gently. It crashed. David Walliams' rise to mainstream fame didn't begin on Britain's Got Talent. Long before the primetime smiles and theatrical reactions, he was known as a sharp, boundary-pushing comedian. His work in Little Britain made him a household name, but it also quietly laid the foundation for future controversy. The show relied heavily on caricatures, exaggeration, and shock value, things that worked in the early 2000s, but aged uncomfortably as public sensibilities evolved. Still, Walliams survived the cultural shift. In fact, he thrived. He rebranded himself as a lovable national figure, reinventing his image through family-friendly television and best-selling children's books. By the time he joined Britain's Got Talent in 2012, he was no longer just a comedian. He was a brand. On BGT, Walliams played a very specific role. Simon Cowell was the brutal realist. Amanda Holden was the emotional anchor. Alicia Dixon balanced credibility and warmth. And Walliams? He was the jester with a heart. He hugged contestants, wept openly, pressed the golden buzzer with dramatic flair, and positioned himself as the defender of the underdog. Viewers loved him for it. Ratings soared. Clips went viral. His reactions became memes. For years, he seemed indispensable. But television personas are performances, and off-camera, whispers had been circulating for a long time. Inside the industry, Walliams' behavior was reportedly far less gentle than what audiences saw. Crew members, writers, and fellow performers allegedly experienced a different version of him, one sharper, more cutting, and less restrained. Still, none of it reached the public in a way that stuck. In British entertainment, difficult behavior is often tolerated if someone delivers ratings, and David Walliams delivered them consistently. The turning point didn't come from a single explosive scandal. It came from accumulation, small moments, leaked comments, quiet discomfort that eventually grew too loud to ignore. In 2022, everything changed. Audio recordings surfaced from the Britain's Got Talent set that shattered the carefully maintained image. In the leaked footage, Walliams could be heard making cruel, mocking remarks about contestants, people he had hugged on stage, praised publicly, and presented himself as emotionally invested in. The language was shocking, not just because it was offensive, but because it exposed a stark contrast between his on-screen compassion and off-screen contempt. Contestants he had pretended to champion were reduced to jokes once the cameras stopped rolling. The public reaction was immediate and unforgiving. Viewers felt betrayed. Fans who had admired his sensitivity and kindness now questioned whether it had ever been real. Social media erupted with clips, comparisons, and harsh reassessments of his career. Suddenly, moments that once seemed playful or cheeky were reinterpreted as mean-spirited. His history was re-examined. Old jokes resurfaced. Past performances were viewed through a new, uncomfortable lens. Walliams issued an apology, calling his comments inappropriate and saying they didn't reflect his values. But apologies land differently depending on timing and trust. For many, the damage was already done. The apology felt reactive, not reflective. It sounded like damage control, not accountability. Shortly afterward, it was announced that David Walliams would not be returning to Britain's Got Talent. Officially, the departure was framed as a mutual decision, a desire to pursue other projects, a natural end to a long chapter. But very few believed that explanation. In television, language is often softened to protect brands. Behind the scenes, the message was clear. The risk had become greater than the reward. For BGT, keeping Walliams meant endorsing behavior that no longer aligned with public expectations. For Walliams, losing the show meant more than just a judging seat. It meant the collapse of the persona he had spent years constructing. What followed was a kind of cultural exile, not dramatic, not explosive, but deeply symbolic. Television appearances slowed, projects were quietly shelved, his name became divisive rather than bankable. Publishers faced criticism over his children's books, with some questioning whether his writing relied on stereotypes and outdated tropes. Libraries and schools debated whether his books still belonged in classrooms. The once unquestioned national treasure label evaporated almost overnight. What made Walliams' fall particularly striking was how fast public sentiment turned. There was no long defense phase, no gradual forgiveness. Once the illusion broke, people stopped trying to repair it. They simply moved on. This wasn't just about a few offensive comments. It was about trust. Audiences are remarkably forgiving when they believe someone is authentic, but they are ruthless when they feel manipulated. The sense that Walliams had performed empathy rather than lived it became central to the backlash. People didn't just feel disappointed, they felt played. And yet, the story isn't as simple as villain versus victim. David Walliams is undeniably talented. His career didn't happen by accident. He understands comedy, timing, and emotional manipulation better than most, and that understanding helped him rise and fall. In many ways, he became a casualty of the very system that rewarded exaggerated personalities and emotional spectacle. Britain's Got Talent thrives on extremes, big reactions, big tears, big moments. Walliams gave the show exactly what it wanted for years. But when the performance extended too far beyond the stage, when the contrast became impossible to ignore, the system turned on him. There's also a broader cultural shift at play. What passed as edgy humor in the early 2000s no longer survives unchallenged. Public figures are no longer judged solely on talent, but on consistency between public image and private behavior. The gap between those two worlds has become smaller, more visible, and far less forgiving. Walliams found himself on the wrong side of that shift. Today, he remains largely silent about Britain's Got Talent. No explosive interviews, no redemption arc, at least not yet. He continues to write, but without the same universal embrace. His presence in mainstream entertainment feels cautious, measured, almost tentative. The confidence that once defined him has been replaced by distance. Whether David Walliams can rebuild his reputation remains an open question. British audiences have short memories, only when someone demonstrates genuine change. Redemption is possible, but it requires more than apologies. It requires humility, consistency, and time. A lot of time. What really happened to David Walliams wasn't a single scandal or one bad recording. It was the slow exposure of a disconnect between who he appeared to be and who he was when he thought no one was watching. Britain's Got Talent didn't just give him fame, it gave him a mask, and when that mask slipped, the fall was inevitable. In the end, his story is a cautionary tale about modern celebrity, about the dangers of performing kindness instead of practicing it, about how quickly applause can turn into silence, and about how, in the age of leaked footage and cultural reckoning, no public image is indestructible. If David Walliams ever returns to the spotlight in the way he once occupied it, it won't be because people forgot. It will be because they believed he finally understood why he lost it.